Go back to the 1st of December 1976. England may have been dreaming of a white Christmas, gathering round their TV sets at supper time watching the Today Show, but they were about to be given an early festive greeting from a group of young men who were about to create musical history.
You dirty son. You dirty old man.
Keep going, go on. You've got another 5 seconds. Say something outrageous.
You dirty
Clever boy.
What a fucking rotter.
Well, that's it for tonight. Good night.
Punk rock had arrived, and they were the Sex Pistols.
We're actually going to make history. This day will really change everything.
It's hard to imagine now that anybody could get so annoyed at a few swear words by a pop group that somebody would actually kick their TV in.
Punk was about hating everything and everybody.
There wasn't much of a life out there, really. They kept telling you, I mean, if you went to some sort of teacher at school and asked him what you could do, they told you nothing. So it kind of was our way of creating a sort of a life for ourselves.
Punk had already laid down its roots in America. Bands like Television, the New York Dolls and the Ramones had started a new music scene. But it took the mind of an Englishman to develop it. He was Malcolm McLaren.
I didn't really invent punk rock. Punk rock really was that existential attitude that goes way back to me as a teenager. I am an antichrist. There was no real manifesto. People call me a Svengali and a manipulator. I was just conscious all the time of wanting so much to create wildness and to be an architect of disaster in which that wildness could really take off.
Record companies were falling over themselves to sign up bands, and soon the charts became full of the sound of punk.
I refused to leave that particular record company, EMI, until he decided to sign them. He said, well, I've been up all night, I've been to Doncaster on the train. They sound terrible, they'll never sell a record. And I didn't say so what, but I thought that. And I said, well, maybe they will in a few years' time. Give it a shot.
1 week after EMI dumped the Sex Pistols, A&M Records picked them up and staged a contract signing ceremony in front of Buckingham Palace.
I chose that site because I thought A&M doesn't really mean very much. It's not like EMI. So at least we should sign them in a very baronial and really important place. I thought, outside the gates of Buckingham Palace, brilliant. And the next song will be God Save the Bloody Queen. God save the Queen! She ain't no human being. There is no future. There was this character called Richard Branson, rather a strange hippie guy with dirty Aran knit sweater and constantly phoning me up and coming round and trying to make me share a kebab meal, which I wasn't interested in, but he persuaded me finally to go to some kebab restaurant on Westbourne Grove where he dictated the fact that Virgin was the perfect home. And I said, but they're with these groups like Tangerine Dream and Can. It's all so hippie and this funny hippie logo. And I said, oh, I don't think it's right for the Sex Pistols. I don't really want to sign with you, Richard.
But there was a problem. Punk was being banned by radio and television, and because of the reports in the media that punk music was associated with violence, bands found that they were being turned away from venues across the UK. There was nowhere for them to play.
We got banned from playing a lot of places, so we was on this coach just driving all over England, being told you can't play here, you know.
In those days, they used to, like the religious group of the town used to come out and sing hymns and stuff outside the venue if you were allowed to have it on, especially on the Anarchy tour.
My personal view on punk rock is that it's nauseating, disgusting, degrading, ghastly, sleazy, prurient, voyeuristic and generally nauseating. I think that just about covers it as far as I'm concerned. I think most of these groups would be vastly improved by sudden death. The worst of the punk rock groups, I suppose, currently are the Sex Pistols. They are unbelievably nauseating. They are the antithesis of humankind. I would like to see somebody dig a very, very large, exceedingly deep hole and drop the whole bloody lot down it. You know, I think the whole world would be vastly improved by their total and utter non-existence.
Two of the bands to emerge from the summer of '76 were the Stranglers and the Jam. But were they punks?
Well, we didn't really fit in at all. We were misfits completely because we were a bit older and we could play a bit better. And we knew that, and everyone else knew that. And you see, the thing is, if you're going to create a media explosion about some movement, then everyone's got to wear the right uniform and all this. And we just didn't fit in. We didn't look right and we didn't dress right.
I thought they were a punk band, yeah, you know, because they turned up before the mod revival, you know, they were kind of... I thought they was a punk band anyway, you know, I used to... But then, you know, like, I'm probably the only one that would say that, you know, because they're all punk bands to me.
Punk just means a period of time in my life when I was 17 or 18. And I was bored stiff with all the 70s groups around that time, all the progressive groups, which I really couldn't relate to at all. And I didn't like all the pop stuff. I was kind of too old for that glam, mud, sweet, all that stuff. So punk was just perfect.
Punk also created scenes that had never happened at gigs before. And two things that punk rockers became famous for were the pogo and gobbing.
The worst thing about it really was that the captain always he couldn't play. Because you sort of get this big grolly stuck on your D string or something, and all of a sudden he'd be all like that. And so he used to have to stop and sort of carefully wipe it off every time and then start.
Well, we sort of started that, unfortunately, because we had a song called Schoolman, where I would I'd seen a friend of mine do this joke where he masturbated his throat and reached an orgasm, and then he was an actor, an out-of-work actor, and I really thought this was really, really funny, and so just for a laugh, I did it one day at the end of this song called Schoolman that we had, and it just took off from there.
Punk was also a fashion statement, and 16 years later, punk has appeared on the catwalks of Paris, with leading designers adapting its look into their collections.
You can see the relation of all the mixing. It's at the same time Indian, that, you know, the person here, Indian and punk. And some of the primitive one were in metal, so it's punk.
Punk, like every period in music history, had to come to an end. And when the Sex Pistols played their final show in San Francisco on the 14th of January 1978, many said it was over. Johnny Rotten became John Lydon, and Malcolm McLaren decided to capture its spirit on celluloid forever. He told his version of the punk story in the film The Great Rock and Roll Swindle.
A visit to Brazil, engineered by the Sun newspaper when we were in San Francisco to meet up with the famous train robber Ronnie Biggs, one of the most wanted men in those days from Scotland Yard, and perhaps him reciting some poetry with the Sex Pistols music seemed a fun idea for them. They saw a story, they could create outlaw meets outlaws. It was there that I gave birth to the idea of the Great Rock and Roll Swindle.
Teaming up with Britain's most wanted criminal to make music also happened again in October '91, when Die Totenhosen visited Brazil for a carnival in Rio. But do Die Totenhosen consider themselves to be punks? Are they keeping the spirit of '76 alive?
Punk is dead. It's ridiculous. Punk is dead since 1979, in my eyes. But, you know, and we don't want to hide behind that meaningless word, punk. It's a label for a certain corner in rock and roll history.
In 1993, everyone seems to be talking about a punk revival. But a reformation of some of the bands in their original lineups, will it ever happen?
You know, all this fuss about the Clash, right? The records are great and everything, and it was really representative of its time. And I think that's sort of what Big Audio Dynamite are about, of this time now, you know, so I sort of say that.
The original Stranglers can't reform because they've never split up. You know, I mean, I left the band and the band carried on with two new players. So to me, it's not really I can't. The original Stranglers can't reform until there is no Stranglers, and there still is. So it's a question that it's impossible question to answer at the moment.
However, one of the legendary punk bands did reunite in September of this year, purely for fun.
First and foremost, it's for us doing it because it's fun to play something that was the group that we first joined when we first started with rock and roll. And it helps to kind of reaffirm the spirit that made us start all this in the first place.
Tony James did take the ideas of punk one stage further, though. He transformed them into a group of the future, Zig Zig Sputnik.
I always wanted to have a group that if I could walk into a nightclub in 15 or 20 years' time and see Elvis Presley, what would he sound like? And that's what I wanted to sound like. And so it was to create a futuristic rock and roll music. It's something that still interests me.
Although John Lydon declined to be interviewed for this look back at punk, he did have this to say on the subject in January of last year.
We go on now to the Sex Pistols.
No, we don't.
We don't at all.
No, there's no need.
No, you say so.
You should get the re-release of that when I'm good and ready.
But it's clear that he has become more of a respectable character in his old age and rejected some of his punk ideals.
Don't you spit at me! You spit at me and I shall personally throw you out.
Although punk paved the way for a new music revolution, techno could also be described as doing the same thing in the 90s. From a bedroom to a dance floor, new tunes are being created every week. Could techno be bigger than punk?
No, there's no content. And it's all thievery, there's nothing original in that. It's just disco by any other name.
I mean, techno, you can look at the charts now, I mean, it's totally outstripped what punk did. Far more people have experiences of going to, like, house clubs, techno clubs, than people had going to punk clubs.
Okay, ready to rock.
Sadly, one of the characters of punk is no longer with us, but Sid Vicious will be remembered in more ways than one.
The worst you can do now for the next couple of hours is spoil your own dream, for this is what is not, and surely all you ever wanted. Tatty bye.
And that's it for tonight's News at Night. Next up, 3 from 1. Bye.